built in 1993. And I remember when it was built. It was great and very convenient at the time to have that available to us. But over the course, let's see, in 2000 and what was it, 2010 or 2010, I believe that Albertsons closed its doors. And from that point on, the center's never really done as well. Obviously, it's struggled. Right now, as you may recall, the center's got some out parcel development. We've got along Mitchell-Hammock Road, we've got Wendy's and Boston Market, and as well as the BP Circle K convenience store on the hard corner. And as you work your way down on Alafaya Trail, you've got the Burger King that gains access through the shopping center, and then further south is Aldi and the veterinary office. To the west, we have the water treatment plant and an undeveloped tract of land as well that separates the shopping center from the new Kyoto Japanese restaurant and Popeyes redevelopment, and ultimately the Signal there to the west. Just to give some information about the center, if we could go to the next slide, please. It's the shopping center itself, which is the subject of our discussion, is really two lots today. Albertsons had its own lot. It was included the building area for Albertsons, and when you consider the mezzanine area and the liquor box that they had at the time, that was a total of just under 70,000 square feet of floor area. The other lot 2, was the balance of the retail development, and that measured just under 20,000 square feet. So we were looking at a total aggregate just within the anchor store and its retail of about 89,500 square feet, plus or minus. So a fairly decent size project. And it's I think some of the challenges that the shopping center seen ever since Albertsons vacated the box was, it's an awkward shaped, it's an awkward sized box. Back at the time when it closed its doors in 2010, it was too big for certain grocery stores. It was too small for big box development. It really kind of fell in between, and so it sat vacant and got caught up in some ownership issues and then some legal property issues. And fortunately, Mr. Gendro and his team have come along and took the risk to go ahead and take, clean up those legal issues and take ownership of the property and make an investment within the city. To kind of add some other challenges associated with the strip center. Apart from having a vacant anchor and not driving traffic to the center, the strip center is set back way far from the road. It's very far from Alafaya Trail. To be able to see what's in there, it really has no visibility from Mitchell-Hammock, but to see what you have from Alafaya Trail even makes that opportunity to keep those good tenants in that strip center that much harder. Kind of add insult to injury, then you had the DOT, as a part of the Alexandria intersection improvements, push the median opening a little further to the north so that it didn't align any further with the current access to the center. And so when you think about that, making the center work within its existing configuration became that much harder. So what we have today, and if you don't mind, Teresa, next slide. What we have today is a proposed redevelopment of the shopping center, and it's got a lot of moving parts to it, and it's got a lot of really, in our opinion, some great improvements to help make the shopping center viable, to help make it relevant again. One of the first things that might not be evident from the plan, but you can kind of see it when I call it out, is that, and you've seen it out there today. 30 foot of the shopping center has been taken off the front of it. So the whole vestibule area, including the mezzanine that was in the old Albertsons, has been removed. And actually the front of the store pushed back. That helps create a depth of a box that becomes a little more relevant in today's leasing market. Furthermore, the anchor is to be split into two boxes. So now we're looking at a size, again, that becomes much more realistic to get a tenant in there, and a quality tenant that would keep the center alive and drive it. As you've probably seen, it's not a secret we can disclose. It's in fact, I think it's advertised on the screening for the demolition there. Actually, the The box, which is closest to Mitchell Hammock Road, the large box, has been placed under lease with Sprouts, which is an organic grocer out of the West Coast and making its way into Florida. They actually have one under construction now on Aloma out in Winter Park as well. But so we're excited. It's a good quality tenant and a dedicated organic grocer, which I think will do well within the city of Oviedo. Furthermore, we're looked at taking, in order to create a shopping center that was relevant to the street and a shopping center that could, again, have tenants that will stay and are sustainable within the shopping center. We looked at taking the square footage that had been removed, adding a little bit more to the shopping center, and making some street front development. So, and that's as you can see, the new center, the new pad that's located just south of the BP and Circle K, as well as the other pad that's located just north of Burger King. So now we're creating buildings that now have a presence to the street. Becomes a little more inviting to the traveler down Alafaya Trail, a little more interest to say, okay, this center's got some activity, let's come inside and drive a little more life within the center. That fulfills a number of different objectives within the city, one of which is to start pushing buildings more toward the street, and stop the development of these centers that just have stripped way in the far back 40 of the parking lots. So now we start to look at more of a community center as opposed to a dated strip center design. With the relocation of the median cut by DOT, it really forced us to examine, and we needed to examine, the traffic pattern through the site. In fact, if you would, Teresa, if you could just flip backwards one, back to the existing site plan, and it's probably best to see it on here rather than the aerial. So you've driven through the shopping center, I'm sure, several times, but those long runs of parking that are perpendicular to the old Albertsons, but really at an angle to the perimeter roads, they don't function well. And in fact, I remember when the site was fully utilized, and I would cut through the drive aisles, just simply because I'm not going to drive all the way down to the end of the perimeter drive and then get out there and drive all the way back down another row of parking. It really wasn't functional. So if we could switch back, please. Teresa, thank you. So with the revised realigned median cut, it gave us the opportunity to take a road through the center of the parking lot and create a series of parking rows that are much more manageable in front of the anchor tenants, Sprouts and the junior anchor that would be located next to it. It created a good separation to provide access also to the new outparcel area to the north. This internal circulation, keeping people being able to move in and out of the drive aisles as proposed, will be safer and function much better for the visitors to the shopping center and its patrons. Coming in off of Alafaya Trail, you're going to come in and be able to have a straight shot down the spine road to go ultimately where you want to go. Now, we did one of the other improvements that may not be readily visible, but you can see we've actually provided a greater throat depth from Alafaya Trail to the first driveway connection on site. Right now, if you were to turn into the first driveway, you'll notice that you could turn left or right almost immediately to go up to the BP or go down to Burger King. There's next to no throat depth within this for the shopping center for this access point. What we've done is actually made that about 70 to 80 feet from the travel lane of Alafaya Trail, which is much greater than what it was today, which I want to say is in the order of about 25 to 30 feet. And we worked hard with DOT on this access design in order to make it better, but still functional, because although we have the shopping center internally that we're working in, we still have to maintain access to all the other outparcels that are not subject to this development. For instance, Burger King. We still have to provide access to Burger King. Traditionally, they've had that perimeter road right down from the access point to the south into Burger King. Well, we're not going to be able to maintain that direct connection in that manner any longer, just simply because of the stacking that we need to provide coming into this access point. So instead, we're going to bring them down. The first driveway will bring them down into the back entrance into Burger King. But we're still going to allow them to exit. We have to maintain that second access to Burger King, so we still have to have them to be able to exit through the out parcel directly to the north so they can get back to the main drive. on Alafaya Trail. So we've got those constraints we had to work around. We also have to maintain truck flow through the site. The trucks have to be able to get to the back of the buildings and also exit out onto Alafaya Trail. So you could kind of see in our design, we've got turning radiuses are taken into account, access for the large trucks are taken into account, and we're not taking them through the parking lot. We really can't take them through the parking lot. We've got to provide that perimeter flow so they can come in off of Mitchell Hammock and off of Alafaya Trail and still navigate to the back of the store without causing a minimal amount of conflicts. As far as the remaining access point, the other access points into the center, they remain as is. With a couple of improvements, we are actually proposing to put in a turn lane now off of Mitchell Hammock Road into the westernmost access on Mitchell Hammock. There isn't a turn lane there today. So there'll be a turn lane added as a part of the project. Another improvement, which will aid in the further interconnection of properties along Mitchell Hammock Road, is that the ownership group has agreed to dedicate a cross-access easement on the vacant parcel that's in between the shopping center and the Kyoto and Popeyes out parcels. That property is under the same ownership as the team that has this shopping center. However, its development is long into the future from a time constraint and also a number of other design and permitting issues that are associated with it. However, they have committed to dedicating an easement to the benefit of the public for cross-access that would ultimately connect the shopping center to those out parcels and ultimately to Lake Jessup Road. And that will help the city in the long term, because as the city starts to investigate further improvements along Mitchell Hammock Road, there's going to be options available to be taken into account. There were, as you can imagine, in taking a look at a center such as this and making the improvements to try and make the center sustainable, make it relevant, but also have to meet budgets. There were a number of items that we worked with the city, and the NSDA before you tonight, the Master Land Use Plan and Preliminary Subdivision Plan, is the product of a collaborative effort that we had a very good working effort with staff to really lay it all on the table, and we greatly appreciate all the time that staff and the city had taken to work with us on this, to come to compromise, to come to resolution on a number of different areas that were making the redevelopment of this center very, very difficult and challenging. And I think what we have before you tonight is really a very, very good a solution that will allow the center to then redevelop, improve in many different ways, and hopefully become a star for the city moving forward. Now with that, I understand the staff will give their presentation, and in reality we're in agreement with staff's recommendations. In fact, I think we're in agreement with pretty much all the recommendations at this point in time, but I would like to have Scott, if I may, come up and just briefly explain why there was an issue regarding out parcel signage that I think we've all come to agreement on. And I just want him to kind of explain that for you, because it was, I think, really the only item that seemed like we were at odds with staff on, and just like to explain that further if we could. Scott.
Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
PJ. Thank you. I'm Scott Malinock with Michael Brady Architects, address 100 Colonial Center Parkway, Lake Mary, Florida. Enough about parking stalls and driveways. Now we can get to the real sexy stuff and get a glimpse of what the buildings are going to look like in their future life on this. If we can go to one of the next slides, Doctor. Yeah, there should be some exterior elevations that have, there we go. There'll be three of these. The first one, really four components of the project. One that we're calling the main anchor portion of the building, which is what the current Albertsons box is. From the left-hand component, which is their current, what used to be the liquor end cap, to the piece that will be the Sprouts in the center, to a third to be determined tenant on the right, then staff has been gracious to work with us to do an allocation of a 3 square foot per linear footage of the frontage, which works for us for what the tenant expectation for signage is. You can see that it's not a continuous signage band, given what the architectural elements are, breaking up the features, giving some interest. The piece in the center, what we're showing there, the very large piece in the center, of course, is the Sprouts main sign, and staff has worked with us to provide a 250 square foot maximum sign allocation for their main sign, which would be workable for the facade. The other small ones are their supplemental prototypical signs, fresh vegetables, vitamins, etc. So those are the types of things there. And then to be determined, tenant signage on the right-hand side, and a little bit that returns around the corner on that bottom elevation, that returns around the corner of the existing liquor store end cap, but all works well within the allocation that staff has recommended, and we would agree with that recommendation as well. Doctor, if you can go to the next slide for us, which should be similar graphic, the attached existing shops. You can also see that, if you're familiar with the center, completely brand new look. We've really embellished a lot of the massing, bringing in a lot of new architecture. And again, the allocation that's been recommended by staff is 2.5 square feet per lineal footage of frontage, but we're not utilizing all of that given the architectures, the ups and downs, the breaks into facades, things of that nature. And in addition, the ownership even has lease restrictions on signage. They don't want continuous sign bands. Where there's a lease line between tenants, they'll require the signage to get no closer than 1.5 feet from the lease line. Same thing for your neighbor. So the signs aren't going to be any closer than 3 feet apart, which provides gaps and breaks and things, even restrictions to letter heights. So the allocation that staff has recommended on the attached shops is workable as well. And then thirdly, on the next slide, Doctor, is the outparcel building that on the site plan we were looking at. This is the building that's in the northeast corner of the site, just below the BP. This was one that staff had a little bit of a concern about, in the manner that the frontage along Alafaya times the square footage allowance would all be utilized on the front facade, and that's not the intention of ownership. We want to take the square footage that's allocated on the front facade, and as you can see, it's 4-sided architecture. The architecture is consistent around all 4 sides of the building. The allocation on the front facade, plus that same allocation on both side facades, is what we're using to generate what our total square footage of signage is. We're not using the linear footage of the rear facade, but the square footage that's allocated to us on the front and the 2 sides, we're allowed by ordinance to allocate some of that square footage to the rear. So even that recommendation would be satisfactory to ownership too. So I think from a signage standpoint, we're in good shape. Thank you.
And that wraps up our brief overview on the project, and obviously would love to answer any questions that you may have regarding that following staff's presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant?
Madam Chair, a quick question.
Mr. Pollard?
Regarding the, and then I want to say thank you to you guys for putting together a really good presentation, and I know I appreciate somebody willing to reinvest in Oviedo, and I think it's going to be an awesome plaza. Regarding the access from Mitchell Hammock, currently, since the plaza was built in 1993 or whatever, our city's grown a lot. There's a lot more traffic now on Mitchell Hammock. There's a lot more traffic coming up 434 Alafaya. And since the plaza has been sort of abandoned for a while, it's relatively easy to cross Mitchell Hammock from that northern access point to make a left down onto Mitchell Hammock to approach Lake Jessup. When that plaza opens up and all the retailers are in there, I foresee a lot more traffic trying to go to the north, cross Mitchell Hammock, and then make a left towards Lake Jessup. Adding in another right turn lane adds a little bit more, which I think is a great idea, but it adds another level of Frogger to play for cars coming to the north. What is the time frame on the cross access easement that you're talking about on that parcel C or whatever it was classified as? I know developments into the future. And if it's not soon, what is sort of the plan to keep
Right.
the issues from occurring for people trying to go north,
No, I understand.
and crossing that busy street.
Thank you. No, great question. It's part of the success in securing some of these quality tenants has been the fact that the center has the access that it currently has, and so that was an item that we had discussed and investigated quite a bit. In the interim, what we've agreed with staff and with Public Works is to go ahead and provide markings on the pavement in order to say not to block this access point. Because I understand what you're talking about. I drive that road every day as well myself.
Right.
Long term, the solution is going to be the cross access, without question. I mean, there's no way that we can look at it any different way. And I think as far as the timing of that cross access is going to be driven by the ability to get development interested in that parcel, and so that the cost of that development of that parcel can be absorbed. Because that's a challenging parcel. I mean, there's a reason why that parcel hasn't been developed, in this entire time, and we've seen where parcels have been developed. There are soils issues. There are regulated wetland issues. There's a number of things that are that make that challenging and going to take a little more time. But we believe that I believe Jim, I know that you don't have anyone necessarily signed up at this point in time, but that area is being marketed. And there's been interest expressed. I don't have a time frame for its construction at this point in time. However, the good news is that there is going to be a legal instrument in place that's going to allow for that connection to happen. And so that's step one, which I think is great. And I think we're all of the understanding that connection will in time be proven to be very important.
And one follow-up. So I understand that access is important to and from the plaza.
Right.
Has it been considered in the interim to restrict a left turn onto Mitchell Hammock from the northern exit of the plaza until the cross the cross access could be developed?
Right. At this time, no, because of the fact that having that access, it's at this point in time the only full access that's available to the plaza, was basically a condition of getting some of the tenants in that.
So
that we
the
have.
tenants were concerned with cars being able to leave and head to,
That's right.
I guess, the east on Mitchell Hammock?
West.
Or west.
West.
I'm sorry,
Right.
I don't turn it around up here.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
No, you're absolutely right, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
And has there been any studies conducted or anything, discussions between staff or Public Works and the ownership about the impact of the additional traffic trying to turn left onto Mitchell Hammock during a busy time of day?
Yeah, we've conducted traffic studies as a part of the development review.
And what was what did you guys find?
Well, it's
What was the
interestingly, the city actually, from a traffic perspective, that this site has been vested as a part of its previous development, and really what we're looking was the incremental increase of only from the 89,000 to a maximum of 99,000. So, and as a part of that, the city, over the course of time, realizing that we're becoming more and more developed, has implemented mobility strategies to help with some of those incremental increases. And so what we've agreed to do is put in some additional mobility strategies within the development.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Wright.
A follow-up to Mr. Pollack. Because we understand there's a timing issue
Right.
across. One concern I have is that, and again, while we appreciate you putting the cross-access easement in this document, that's normally part of our process anyways at the city, that when you have contiguous parcels like that have access across them, we would ask for that anyways.
Okay.
The concern I have is that it's basically taking us to Lake Jessup, which, as you pointed out, has a very short throat, coming onto Mitchell Hammock, and then, all those cars would be stacking
Right.
along the frontage of the retail and the new developments that you would put in. Obviously, my hope would be that when those times come to do that, that we might look at an alternative maybe along the southern side of that parcel so that we can provide some stacking.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Yep.
So while that's the point, the question I have, though, is there is an existing cross-access easement into the Aldi property, which takes us to the other signal, the intersection at here at Alexandria and State, Road 434 that the DOT finally put in. So to me, that obviously is a faster path to providing a signalized intersection. This is a very large plaza. You're not developing this plaza for the intent of not being
Right.
successful with it.
Right.
So even in, the people that have been here since, as I remember when the Albertsons was built, I see the intensity of this being far greater than Albertsons ever was at this point, The examples I use because of the facility that you've named are there's facilities in Winter Park that have organic grocery stores. The Trader Joe's in Winter Park, you can't find a parking space. The Lucky's down on Waterford, massive parking issue. So I truly see this as a benefit to the city, and we're looking forward to it. But I see the intensity much higher than what was done on the Albertsons. So, and this would be a major parcel that wouldn't have a signalized intersection. So,
Your observations are well founded. In fact, and we actually wrote in the NSDA, and the city has agreed to help us in coordinating discussions with property owners south of this project in order to get that cross-access. And actually, that's specifically addressed in the NSA, because it is the intent of the city to have cross-access, to share cross-access, take some of the traffic off of the main roadways and be able to internally share the traffic between the parcels. The challenge we have, of course, is Burger King is not owned by this ownership group. It's a separate owner. Obviously, Aldi is not owned by this ownership group. There are certain easements that are in place via the old Albertsons plat. There's actually a track that goes into the Aldi parking lot. And although that track does not fall in line with any of its current drive aisles, we do believe that there are certain rights to be had as a result of that cross-access easement. And then so it's really just a matter of getting Burger King and Aldi and the appropriate people to the table in order to discuss what opportunities might be available to make that cross-access happen. So that is something that our ownership group wants to pursue. In fact, that's the reason why we actually addressed it in the agreement. So with time, we hope that is able to come to fruition. Yeah.
just so I'm clear, looking at the documents we have, the Aldi site has a dedicated access to the intersection at Alexandria. But you don't have an access through the Burger King? There's no...
The Burger King, believe it or not, they have actually, if you look at their plan, they actually have a driveway stub out that goes to their property line.
And
But
I think
Aldi
that
does not...
In your documents as
Yeah.
well, in your master plan, you also have a stub out which kind of somewhat lines up with the, into the Aldi parking.
Yeah.
It's set up for 2 spaces, but it looks like a stub out.
That's right.
Is that...
That's
actually-
where the access easement's supposed to be. Now, if you notice, it kind of goes into their bypass lane of their drive-through.
Sure.
So it's not exactly in the best spot. But the connection to Aldi's has not been made. Aldi's was not, for whatever reason, the connection to Aldi's was not required, from Aldi's to the Burger King was not required, or I don't know exactly the circumstances associated with it. But that is something that definitely our ownership group wants to pursue. I mean, to have access to this signal will be definitely a benefit for everybody. Yeah.
But no timeline.
No, because that's going to require Burger King and Aldi and this ownership group to all come together. Yeah.
Understood. At this point, your tenants, your future tenants, the ownership at this point, you're satisfied with the access?
Yeah, satisfied with the access at this point, and I think I think with time, there'll definitely be opportunities to continue the improvement along the corridors. Yeah.
My concern is that there's nothing here.
Yeah.
You come in, do
Yeah.
your development, it's done. We may never see, because we just don't have the security to know that we're going to have a parcel that has limited access.
Yeah.
With, one left movement out of the site, which is in a very congested area,
Right.
as any resident here would know. So.
Yeah.
There was other questions. I know the parking, the staff recommendations for the signage, no questions. We don't, everything that they've recommended in their, in our decision-making, you're satisfied with?
Right, that's my understanding. We're good.
It's different
Yeah.
than what's written in the...
That is. Yeah, there was in the agreement was different, and that's why we wanted to make sure we clarify
Okay.
that, right.
There was one other item I just want to make sure we're clear on, is that you're okay with, is the recommendation, I think, from Public Works on just, it was on NSDA page 8. It was just they were rewriting a paragraph about the vehicular circulation that, it wouldn't require, if there is any tweaks or anything, it wouldn't require any modification, or you have to come back to do a modification or, another meeting with us to
Right.
talk about the, master land use plan or the PSP. You're good with that language too?
Yeah, and we in Public Works have had a lot of discussions on this. I think, where Public Works is evaluating our plans and taking a closer look at the details associated with it, I think we all understand that there's going to be, the opportunity for some comments and massaging of different elements. I will say that any sort of a significant change to the plan, a significant loss of parking row, or the way that these parking aisles are aligned, could be problematic for us in the design and the way that it's set up. So, and I think, I don't want to speak for Public Works, but I think from Public Works' perspective, they want to reserve the right to issue comment, which we could definitely appreciate. But at the same point in time, we can't afford to have a broad change in the way that the site plan is currently laid out. I mean, all of this is associated with how you bring in the tenants in order to make this a success. And so,
I'll make sure there's
yeah.
no conflict with the language, that you're, that there's no question that we have to
Right.
negotiate or anything on staff's recommendations for
Right.
how we make our decisions.
Right.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask one follow-up?
Mr. Pollak?
I'll be very, very brief. Quick question. On the cross-access,
Yes, sir.
if financing made itself available, whether it be public financing or other sources, would it speed up the ability for you to provide that cross-access to the north?
Can you state your name and address for the record?
Sure.
Thank you.
Name is James Gendro, Tailwinds Development, one of the owners of this project. 100 Colonial Center Parkway, and that's in Lake Mary. Also, 20-year resident of Oviedo, so I have a strong interest to make this, like you brought up, Mr. Wright. This is a long-term hold. We're here for the long haul. I've been here 20 years. I've been trying to get this half my time in the city of Oviedo, so I did see it like you did when it was Albertson's, a shop there. Went to the bank. That was our bank, South Trust Bank, which since has been acquired by a million other banks. But yeah, we're long-term holders, and if we could get that access, and if the city would assist us financially, I'm not saying that, I'm saying if they would, somehow, some way. It's expensive. I'll tell you what we're dealing with, just briefly, so I want to bore you with it, because the engineer can do better than I can. We have 17 foot of muck in various areas of the site, mostly along the front, and we dealt with that at our Publix that we built at, just outside where I live, Live Oak. We built the Publix there. We had isolated muck there, 17 foot deep. We got rid of all that muck for $1 million. It was just over $1 million. We did that as a deal with Publix, a JV with Publix. We own the out parcels, they own that. But ultimately, Publix paid the $1 million to remove that muck. So you can see what we're dealing with on Mitchell Hammock. There's probably more muck there. We want to develop it. I have 2 or 3 tenants right now that are interested in it. Those tenants are national restaurants. They want to be here. They're not in Oviedo right now. I think it's the best idea, is to get that access, paralleling Mitchell Hammock, because I've driven it at 5 o'clock, probably right now. I've seen it back up from 426 all the way up to 434. We all have here. So anyway, it's a long way to tell you, we want to develop it. We want the access to Alexandria. We want the access to Lake Jessup. It helps us with rents. Rents go up if we can give tenants better access. One point, very important point, is you mentioned the left-hand turn going back westbound on Mitchell Hammock. That's a critical movement for us because of our tenant Sprouts. They made it just key for them. They need to be able to get their people out and back going westbound. They would love that access too that you referenced, Mr. Pollak. They would want that. It comes down to economics. Can I get these tenants to pay us enough money to justify I think I'm about $4 million to get that pad ready. It's a lot of money, right? And but But yeah, we love Oviedo, and we want to do more business here. It's going to be a great center. So I want to thank all of you for your time.
Thank you.
Can I-
Thank you very much.
Before you step down, could I ask a question?
Mr. Ike?
And thank you
Yeah.
for the commitment. Obviously, you've said the key words for me, that you have a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
Would it be something you would entertain then again, my concern is these cross-access easements, is that I would like, before you leave and finish the buildings and you do your final CO, I'd like to see the access there. Do not want to stop progress. I want them to open up as quickly as possible, but I would like to see something that I know at the end of the day, when you guys are done and you're finished with your development and you have all your tenants in there, that we have some type of at least agreement or something that's been documented that we're going to get an access to at least a signal. You know, like I said, I'm more inclined with the Alexandria one than I am with the Lake Jessup, because I think a frontage road is really going to be difficult. You're going to have a 2-car stack, everybody trying to turn to that Lake Jessup light. But that's for the future engineering to be done, and with Public Works in the city and
Yeah.
But I'm asking again, is that something you've committed or would be willing to look at?
We certainly would look at it. I mean, it comes down to economics. Can we afford it? We paid a lot of money for that shopping center. We're putting 25, 26 million into this shopping center. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure, then we got another 4 million there, and then of course, we will do it. It comes down to, can we get any assistance from the city to help us, or maybe even the county, because quite frankly, there's some county roads, state roads out there. I don't think I can give you yet 100% yes. Will we try? Of course we will. It's to our benefit too, but economically right now, it's so hard to do it because we paid so much for this existing center. And I agree with you, though, that Alexandria access, I think it could be to the benefit of Aldi also, for them working with us. And I leave this to the attorneys that we have here, but I know we're working on it. Can't guarantee it, but we're working on it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I have one comment.
Ms. Fowler?
I'm excited for the center to open, so I'm excited about being able to shop at Sprouts and whatever else may or may not be there. But overall, I don't think this is a comment to the developer. Maybe it is a bit, but I'm disappointed in the lack of open space for public use, and that what was paid back into the open space, I believe, that I read through here. I know that the pond counts, the retention pond, which is behind the box store, no one can see, and it's fenced. So for that to be considered all the open space for the development, I think it's sad state of design. I think of where we are as designers as a whole in what's happening in Oviedo. I think this kind of takes a step back a bit. While it's going to be much better than what's there currently, I don't think it's quite at the level of pedestrian circulation and buildings being on the street as what you had stated earlier, as what it could be, and people recreating outside in the space. So I know that it meets the code, and I know that we're not really voting on or making decisions on that. I think it's just disappointing to see that there's no plaza spaces for people to be able to socialize.
Commissioner, we are proposing the plazas that are required, and with respect to the open space, I understand your point about the open space, but that is one of the challenges of the redevelopment of the existing center.
I'm sure it was.
We actually did do a
see it
study.
reading the plan that
Yeah,
was
we did a
acres
study
counted.
to try and see what we could do to get there, and it would knock out 2 acres of the shopping center to get
Okay.
to there. So that was a very, very important element. Yeah.
Just a general comment.
It will look so nice. I mean,
I know it
yeah.
will, and I know,
Yeah.
and I will shop there, and
Yeah.
I will go there. But it's just,
I know.
I feel like it could have had something more, some sort of percentage focused on the plaza. Maybe it's what that ratio would have been in agreement with between you and the city. This is not just a comment for you; it's a comment for
Right.
the city too.
No,
so
we appreciate it.
It's just as a resident, as
Sure.
a person who understands how people socialize in spaces and things like that. It's with everything else that's happening. It's I think it could have happened here too.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions of the applicant? Okay. Mr. Higbee?
Thank you. I will make my presentation as brief as I can because a lot of it's been given to you, and thank you for taking care of some of that. But I'll highlight some of the points that they didn't highlight along the way. I'll probably skip a few things in the staff report that you've had the opportunity to read, but if you want me to comment on those, I'd be happy to go back to those as well. So as you know, this is a request for the LPA to consider and make a recommendation on the resolution for this non-statutory development agreement, master land use plan, and preliminary subdivision plan to council. And as you know, it's a redevelopment site, a little different than some of the master land use plans you might have seen. The property, as they were talking about earlier, is a shopping center consisting of approximately 13.1 acres at the southwest corner of Alafaya Trail and State Road 434 and Mitchell Hammock Road, originally developed in about 1993. The Land Development Code gives you the responsibility to make a written recommendation to City Council to approve with conditions, or deny the proposed non-statutory development agreement and associated documents. And that's with the recommendations that we will talk about from the city attorney and the land use administrator. You probably know that the zoning is C2 commercial in this area. It's surrounded by commercial development on all sides except for a little bit of public institutional to the southwest over by the detention pond on the west edge of the site. And then there's a little bit of C1 zoning, because what they're doing is they're taking in a small, approximately 360 square foot parcel for a sign on Mitchell Hammock Road into this development. If you looked at the preliminary subdivision plan, part of that where they laid out the parcels, you can see where they grabbed that little piece of C1 into the project. So as I believe some of this was mentioned, that they're reconfiguring the existing 2 lots in the shopping center into one shopping center lot with that additional little 360 square foot C1 zoned area for the sign parcel up near Mitchell Hammock Road, as well as 2 additional out parcels. You saw on the maps that were being shown, you can see them on the one that's on the screen now. There's a out parcel at the northeast corner and one at the southeast corner. And as they mentioned, the square footage, when that's all developed, is capped in the development agreement at a maximum of 99,000 square feet. So since it's zone C2, the permissible uses would be C2 uses. They did call out a few other uses in addition in the development agreement. One of them is a craft microbrewery, although that is the subject of a zoning in progress, which is already permitted in C2. In addition, they're asking for ATM kiosks with and without drive-through and artisan food production. So those are not called out currently in the zoning ordinance for C2, but are called out in the development agreement. I'm looking at the pieces I want to skip right now. Give me just one second. We mentioned it was mentioned the open space a minute ago. As you know, probably there was a vesting back in June where the open space question was brought to the council, and that did get approved for a minimum, 25% open space, inclusive of the retention area. There was a change subsequent to the original development of the center where our comp plan redefined open space, and it wouldn't have met the current definition of open space, but it was approved with that open space, and that's why it was determined to be vested. The parking is a ratio that's lower than what our land development code would call for C2 development, but it's not unacceptable for this type of development. They're using the 4.25 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. It's consistent with Institute of Transportation Engineer recommendations for a shopping center, and they do have some challenges fitting in the parking in this development. That's one of the reasons they needed to do that, and also needed to reduce the size of parking spaces. There's a section in the staff report that lists out the landscape buffer sizes One of the notable buffers is near the northeast of the site. There's an oversized buffer there that would average 20 feet and have a minimum of 10 feet, I believe, but average 20. Has a lot of trees in there, and that, I believe, helps to make up for the fact that there isn't a buffer on the southeast corner of the site proposed. They are proposing to meet the requirement for 10% vehicular use area landscaping. They did propose some flexibility in how the area could be landscaped, including allowing for some palm trees on some of the islands on the interior. The plaza and open space, again, was mentioned earlier. There is a minimum requirement for a plaza in the LDC, which they carried forward here. And if you actually look near the northeast corner of the site on the OP2 out parcel, they've actually got a plaza noted there. And that plaza has to be unrestricted. You can't prevent others from coming into the site. It can't be just for a private use. The signage was mentioned, and we thought we were probably giving more of a sign presentation before we came to the meeting, but I heard agreement with the sign recommendations at the end of the staff report, so I'll just be brief on the signage. They are getting an additional freestanding sign. Normally for this development, 4 signs would be permitted. They're getting 5 in this development agreement. And then some of the larger signs are somewhat oversized, either in height or square footage or both. So, for instance, the sign on Alafaya near the entrance would be a 140 square foot sign with a maximum height of 14 feet. That's bigger than currently allowed by code. But some of the justifications been talked about earlier, the visibility of the center, the way a lot of it's set back from the road and so forth, would be a justification for that. Another 105 square foot sign would be on Mitchell Hammock Road near the west access, and that would be allowed to have additional height. It's not additional size, but additional height. And then they get another freestanding smaller sign that they normally wouldn't have for this development on Mitchell Hammock. That would be 8 foot tall, 40 square foot size sign, and then each out parcel would get the typical out parcel sign. So that's in addition to the wall sign discussion that we had earlier. I don't need to repeat about the anchors and the out parcels each getting a certain allocation of wall signs, but those are increased over what the LDC permits elsewhere. The architecture is not part of this NSDA. Sometimes it is. So I just want to mention that to you. But the architecture is on file and proceeding for the main center as well as out parcel 2 right now. I think out parcel 1's coming later, if I understand. So the city attorney has reviewed this and recommends approval as far as I understand. And the land use administrator had also recommended approval subject to conditions that were listed, including the ones having to do with the anchor wall signs, including one that had to do with Public Works wanting to maintain the ability to comment on the access later. So that's still there, and I wasn't sure from what I understood in the discussion earlier whether the Public Works condition had clearly been agreed to. You might want to check that if you're not clear on it too. It sounds like the sign conditions were agreed to, as stated in the staff report. So with that, we do recommend approval of the project subject to those conditions, and seek that your recommendation to City Council on that.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Potluck?
I'm going to follow up on what we were talking about with the applicant with the northern access. As the applicant mentioned, it's costly to connect through the cross-access easement if he were to take that upon himself financially. He's already demonstrated a financial commitment already to redevelop the plaza. As the applicant mentioned, the northern access, and I thought this was an interesting point, was vested with the plaza. So the slight increase of square footage, it still assumes that at the time when the plaza was built, that northern access, that access to the north without current traffic conditions was vested. So I'm going to assume, since Albertsons was there first, they get to the right to turn north and then west. That being said, since Albertsons has been abandoned, a lot of businesses has gone up, especially over the last 2 years, on the northern part of, along Mitchell Hammock. We have been promised, and when I say we, I mean as a community, as a city, we have been promised that that access to run alongside Mitchell Hammock to address the growing traffic issues. Numerous times. Every time a business opens, somebody questions about the increase in traffic. They say, don't worry, there'll be, when I say they, I mean the city has said, don't worry, there'll be access. We're given the opportunity here from the owner of the adjacent parcel. We're given that access as a city. They're giving us that access to cross over and utilize a light. They're citing financial difficulty. I understand that. What discussions has the city had with the applicant as far as the ability to either try to procure funds or provide funds to assist in providing that cross access to make it easier for people in the community to actually do business in the redeveloped plaza?
To my knowledge, and keep in mind I'm fairly new here, so if there was any discussion before my time, I don't know about it, but to my knowledge, that issue was not specifically discussed during the generation of this development agreement about how we fund that.
Okay, so there hasn't been any discussion between the city and the applicant about funding the cross access?
Not in a meeting that I was privy to, no.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Wright?
I need some clarification. Mr. Pollack.
Sure.
How would you think a mechanism would be in place for us to use public funds to build on private property for, like, in this case, the development? How would we? I understand what you're asking. I'm just trying to figure out how we would get there. The question is, how would the city doesn't have funding that they're going to fund where they're going to provide funding for a developer to build their road for them? I guess is what I'm asking. And that's where, earlier I had mentioned that, there's back access along the rear of the property. Obviously, there's constraints there because of the wetlands, because of the site conditions themselves, but there's also property back there that the city owns. Now, that would be an issue that, possibly they could work out something with, where the city could dedicate access through the rear, where our treatments of the water plant is, that they're, and I'm throwing this out because, like I said, I don't know this.
Sure.
But I'm trying to figure out the direction that we're going in, is that we're asking, staff how the city can fund, the developer's project,
Right.
without, I don't ever see that happening. That's my question.
So if you're asking me on how I foresee the city using public funds to finance a road on private property, I don't see it as, that's not a question for me, it's a question for the city. But the way I see it, and the point of my line of questioning was, if we have a person who owns private land, and we were promised that there would be access by the city, essentially, when we've approved all of these new businesses that are going up along Mitchell Hammock, and we all use Mitchell Hammock as residents of the city, it's creating a traffic problem for our city. So if we have a traffic problem in our city, Albertsons has been there forever, they've always had the northern access, and the fundamental basis of people being interested in the Albertsons Plaza is being able to turn north. Well, now all this increased traffic that we have from all these businesses that we allowed to develop is causing a problem for our city. So now we have a landowner who's saying, hey, I'm willing to give you access across my land, I just can't afford to put the road in. I'll put it in eventually when I can come up with the money. Or, in a public interest, the city can say, maybe we can come up with, I don't know what the financing structures are in the city, this isn't my area of expertise, but I would like to know is if the city has considered or would consider looking into ways to assist the applicant in providing a cross access, whether it be a loan or whether it be some sort of funding that allows them to do that, so that the people of this community don't, the very next thing they're going to say when the Sprouts opens, besides, wow, I'm glad I get to shop here, is, man, I can't even drive down Mitchell Hammock anymore. And there's a lot of businesses that would be affected by the increased traffic. And people are
Mr.
going to be
Pollack,
excited.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
can I interrupt for just a minute?
You may.
You're talking about access over a piece of property that's not part of this development that's before us tonight.
Well, it is, actually.
And the...
The access actually is part of this. It was discussed. It was shown how the
Okay, but you're talking about over a piece of property
Right.
that is not part of this project.
no, but what is
And
part of this project
that
is
is not-
access to this process. To
That
this
is not before us tonight,
What is before us then?
this project.
What is this project? What is your understanding of the scope of this
Let me-
project if what I'm
I'm
discussing
sorry,
isn't
but-
part of the scope? Because I was asking the city questions, and I'm receiving questions from the board. I don't have to answer your questions. I'm asking questions here so
Mr.
I can make a
Pollard.
vote on behalf of the community.
So don't.
So feel free to allow me to, I can stop asking questions, and when it comes to a vote, I will vote my conscience. But what I'm saying is, I'm allowed to ask questions, and I'm allowed to come to a judgment on what I think. I don't have to answer your questions. So that's all I have to say about that.
Number one, you brought something up in a public forum.
And we can discuss that when a motion is made.
Yes, we.
This
I
isn't
can
a-
ask
this
you
isn't the time for
Pollard, one at a
discussion.
time.
I can ask you a question to clarify, and that's actually what I was doing. It wasn't confrontational by any means.
No, and I didn't assume so.
And
One.
the fact that you're getting emotional about it, or
Not emotional.
agitated, let's say, I want to apologize if that was the
No,
case,
no, I'm not
because it was not confrontational by any means. What I don't see is I see two things. The direction that I thought you were going is looking to see how the public could, in the case us, or the government in a sense, could help fund, and of course from a developer side, no offense to anybody here, is that yes, they would love to have us give them some money to help facilitate their project. I don't see that as a precedent that I would ever want to be setting in that sense for future developments. But secondly, what I was trying to look at was that as an alternative, there may be other ways. Now, we said we have someone from Public Works. Maybe there is a temporary solution that we can provide a less than standard, access, or we can provide, where they wouldn't have to go to the full blown, or we could create something that wouldn't cost them. That would be an option. The other option I considered was the city eventually, again, because this is not going to happen day one. This is going to be a long-term, as they've indicated, they're a long-term commitment to this, is that there needs to be a long-term solution. We don't have one right now. They have an abject right because this is the way the site's laid out. This is their entrance. We can't change that. We can't stop them from making a left. We have to understand that this is a redevelopment, and what they have vested rights on this site is that, there are things that they have asked, and we have given. We've changed the codes for the land development for our signage. Makes sense. The site setback. That's an advantage that we've negotiated with them. We've given them an extra monument sign. We've given them. There's certain things, as part of this negotiation. So one of the things, obviously, that I looked at was because of the access. Is that this is the time for us to try to come up with a commitment that we're going to get. It's not going to happen day one. It's going to happen in 5 years. I don't know, but there is things the city could look at. But us funding it is probably not the direction that I would want us to go. And that's all I was trying to clarify. If that's what you were looking for.
I take no offense, and I understand you completely, and I agree with everything you just said.
Okay.
My question was simply whether or not it's been discussed amongst the applicant in the city with whether or not they said, hey, can we try to come up with a way to help you provide that for the public? Because we have to answer to these traffic problems that are being created around the city about everything we approve. And I'm not saying I don't agree with this. I think everything is great. I'm just wondering if the city is considering the traffic issues and what they've done.
Can I say something?
Just a moment.
That's all I have to say.
Mr. Groot, can I ask for some help, assistance here? It kind of seems like we've gotten off track onto an issue that's not before us. Can you help us get back on track?
Well, in terms of the cross-access, it's just an opportunity to potentially, to plan for potential future actions. The dedication is just the dedication of an easement area. It's not the obligation for anybody to construct anything at any time. So I'm not. I tend to agree with the chair. The discussion about it may be a pertinent question. Has there been any discussion? But whether there's any plans to construct anything there right now is really not material to this development right now.
Thank you.
Does that
Mr.
make
Wright.
sense?
Mr. Group.
Yes.
in history of me being on here, we have had as a board opportunities to add language to a non-statutory development agreement. It doesn't necessarily require, construction, or, but there is an order, our redevelopment. We've had a development that was to put mixed-use townhomes, whatnot, and a percentage of retail. And due to economics, we've changed that multiple times so that when they had to have a certain level of percentage of construction of residential, that we had to have a minimum square footage of retail. Now, we've changed that, but we also had the opportunity to put that language in place. So something that I'd asked earlier, and asked the applicant in a sense, was that, so I guess the question I would ask, if we asked to put language in there that basically said before the end of this completion of the final CO of the last building that was to be tenant-owned or operated, that we would have an access point generated or created. Is that not something that we can't put in this? I mean, isn't that relevant to this discussion?
Well, to place the obligation on the developer prior to CO to have an access point constructed.
Yeah, so I guess I'm asking, if you're telling me the answer is no, then I'll,
Well, let me say it this way, if the answer to that was yes, it would have already been done because there would have been a rational nexus to do it, and there would have been a requirement to do it based upon traffic circulation and the like. The fact that it's not there now indicates that there's no rational nexus to that requirement. Does that make sense?
Well, I understood.
If I got that right, engineer?
It was originally requested that they would provide the cross-access.
It was requested, but did the data support it?
Well, the city right now has a cross-access, like a study of Mitchell Hamlet from
Can you come up to the microphone, please? Thank you.
Did the data support a requirement for an access point right now for this development?
At this point, I don't know the answer to that question. I know the city.
Well, I don't know either.
We have, yes, but we are making, the city, the Public Works Director has a study made from Oviedo Boulevard all the way to 426, which he's analyzing the corridor. And we have informed them that based on that study, whatever comes out of it, if it is indicated that we need to close that left turn, it will be closed based on the recommendations of our engineers. So we wanted, and that's why we requested the cross-access, at least the easement, to be established at this point, because they own the land. So if they sell the land, we wouldn't get it at any point in time to connect it.
And there has to be rational nexus to require the cross-access, which we've done, and the non-statutory DA does that. So the developer's agreeing that there's a rational nexus to require the cross-access, correct?
If we can afford it, of course.
Well, it's in the agreement, so you must have agreed to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're agreeing that there's a rational nexus for that requirement.
And we have talked with.
But the city, on the other hand, has to impose an access point being constructed also has to have rational nexus that's required for this development. And it's not in the DA right now. So there must not be.
Well, and I'm not a traffic study expert. We don't have the traffic consultant in the room right now, but I don't think the traffic study had any clear conclusion that this could not function without that additional access. So
And that's the rational nexus.
that
It has to have
supports
a
the
clear.
point he's making. Would we all think it works better with it? Yeah, we do. I think, but we all agree on that.
And so I think my question of whether or not it was discussed, why this isn't part of it, is relevant and within the scope of everything I just asked you. Thank you very much for that clarification.
It was discussed.
Thank you.
I meant, that's what I want to go up and ask.
Thank you.
It was discussed with the city about how they could assist us
Right.
with this. So this
Right.
was, Jay, before you came on, we
Okay.
had numerous discussions. Yeah.
We talked at length about this, so I mean, I understand what you're saying, but we did talk with city manager and everybody about this. We agree, it's a great thing to have it, but fact is, we don't have the money. How do we pay for something if we don't have the money? We just paid all we did for the center. If you don't have the money, you can't do it. We are not expecting the city to fund this. We didn't ask.
Will it operate better? Of course. Lonnie, you're right. Of course it will. But we don't have the money to do it right now. And it comes down to money. That's all it is. And we are committed about the center.
Well, can I interrupt? From my perspective, and first of all, as I recall from the very first time you came with your whole team,
Yep.
this was mentioned and it was discussed, okay? So definitely discussed from the get-go. That being said, it doesn't really matter if a developer has money or not. What does matter is if you have the data to support a requirement, and that's not before you, so there is no requirement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Madam Chair, I have a
Mr.
question that
Minton?
has absolutely nothing to do with the access point, if I may. My question's on the parking. I mean, it says here in the staff memo on page 2 that the 4.25 spaces per 1,000 square feet is consistent with the Institute of Transportation Engineers standard, but is less than what we normally require in the LDC, which would 1 for 200 square feet, so 5 per 1,000. What is the justification for not holding them to the requirement we normally have under the LDC?
Well, first of all, the development agreement process allows for them to propose an alternative standard. That's one. That's not enough by itself, perhaps, to answer your question, but remember that, because it becomes somewhat of a negotiation at that point in time, and they did propose a different standard, so we asked them to justify that standard, and that was part of the justification when they came back and showed us the consistency with ITE, that's the abbreviation, ITE requirements for a shopping center, and I've seen those standards before elsewhere. So the idea is that a shopping center is a mix of uses, and they have different attributes in terms of when they have peaks and valleys in their parking demand. So that brings down the overall demand that you might get if you were just looking at some of those individual uses, as well as the fact that just the constraints of the redevelopment site, the fact that it's a redevelopment, created some issues with being able to add more parking to the site.
My concern here, and I've stressed this concern to staff before, is that our code, if you look at all the recent construction that's been done, we seem to always miss the mark on the parking, in that if you go to these, there's just not enough spaces for the demand of the commercial entities that are in those spaces. If you look at Oviedo Point, you look at Outback, you look at, I mean, Stonehill's going to have quite a bit, but not next to the buildings you're actually wanting to park at. That's my concern, is that we're bringing in, you know, as it's been said, Sprouts, which is very popular, and if it ends up anything like Trader Joe's in Winter Park, it was the right that that's just plain not enough parking. There's just not there. And I have a feeling that with building 2 anchor retails plus the extra 2 parcels, this will get more traffic than, foot traffic than Albertsons had, and we're reducing the parking that Albertsons had by adding in the 2 extra out parcels. So I don't know. There's a concern I have here with limiting and going below the LDC requirement, knowing that we already have parking issues with the LDC requirement. So, I heard the applicant say to redo the parking plan is going to be cost prohibitive, that it's going to cause some issues if we were to go back and try to change that, which is why I'm trying to bring it up now to see if there's any way to increase the minimum amount of parking we're requiring here.
Another thing I'd like to just bring to your attention, and I can't respond necessarily to those other developments like the Outback because I haven't looked at it and so forth, but there's a lot of studies out there nationally in the planning field that you see for shopping areas, malls, places like that that have these relatively large amounts of parking being shared by a lot of users. And the studies generally show that the parking doesn't get fully utilized for those types of developments. So I think the idea of having some flexibility with the rationale that they were giving us seemed reasonable based on our understanding of that size of a development.
So if I could add, parking is a very interesting discussion, especially now because the technology is changing. So actually, if you go to conferences and planning, the discussion is actually what to do with the existing parking when the autonomous vehicle will reach us, and that is, they're already discussing that. So actually, a lot of, even parking garages that are still being proposed are already being proposed in a way that they can be converted to other uses in the future, because they think in the future we won't need so much parking. Well, we are still a suburban community. We are turning into a little bit more urban community, but we're still a suburban community. So there are several issues here. One is this is a redevelopment, so there are constraints from the site that we had to work with. The previous project had some deviation already for parking. This one, they are proposing compact spaces to address more parking. So they had some constraints on the site because it's a redevelopment, and I agree with you with the design, right? But we have the ideal and the possible. We are working with the possible because this is a redevelopment. So we are very much concerned on design. Architecture is a big issue for us. The signage, one of the issues was design to have the scale, the right character for the city. But so back to parking, we try to address the number of parking by providing compact spaces, and at one point, and this is going to happen in a lot of cities, it's also the turning point to have a multimodal transportation. And we are, I think, reaching that point that, we'll start to have other options. People will start carpooling to places, right? Because it's kind of hard to park. If this is really successful, and we hope it will be, we hope parking will be an issue at one point, right? Because it's going to be successful. So, and transit will hopefully reach us. Autonomous vehicles will also reach us. But and many developments in the city have been granted some deviations. So actually, in the development agreement, what we are doing, we are granting a deviation with a different standard. So it's not, we think, we discussed about that, and they thought that the numbers they had would work for them, and we agree with them. Basically, that's what it is.
I guess I'm just also concerned with not knowing what's going to go into these other parcels other than other buildings other than Sprouts, is that the number of employee spaces that are going to be needed based on how many, what's the employee count going to be, and every time you have an employee parking there, that takes away from customer space. And I mean, that's just what, I witnessed going around the city, and then, people not going to the business because they can't find a parking space there. I mean, I've done it. I've driven up to the place, saw it was completely full, and said, okay, not today, and I'll go somewhere else. And I mean, it's just, when we go below the minimum standard we already have, that's just my concern, is that are we going to come up short if this is successful? Because in the long run, if you can't park there, it won't be as successful because people will leave. And I don't know. I mean, I just want my concern there, and why I just wanted to kind of know why we were going below the minimum, because I couldn't find anything in here that really explained why we were doing that. So I mean, if it is the redevelopment issue and just the constraints of what
of the site, yes. Yeah.
We'll look at that.
Teresa, can I follow up with that about the parking? So the number of spaces has been reduced from what we normally would have required, and the size of the spaces that are going to be there are reduced as well?
The size of the space was reduced, yes. It's our compact spaces.
So they're all
It's 9 by 9, 18. That other jurisdictions have that as the normal. Our normal is 10 by 20.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions of staff? Mr. Wright?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lonnie, I have one for you, and it's on the signature page of the agreement. Let me get down to it. On page 26 of the agreement, it would appear that this is prepared for the signature of Mark Hagel as both a witness and signing it as the developer? See where it says signed,
Right,
sealed,
right.
and delivered?
I'm not sure I put the witness signatures in there. Maybe I did. All I know is that if you start with, I'm not sure if Mark Hagel is also a member of Oviedo SC1GP Inc. That's not right.
Yeah, he is.
But that's a corporation. I don't think I put those underlined names in there. Because as I recall, Mark Hagel's the only officer of the Oviedo SCGP Inc. Corporation, right?
Yes.
Right? Which is the managing partner of the Oviedo SC1 LLP Limited Liability Partnership.
That's correct.
Right? Which is the manager of City Center SC LLC Limited Liability Company. So those signatures over on the left side, I didn't put them there as I recall. It would just be two witnesses.
So the names should
Right.
come out.
The fact that they're underlined indicates that I don't know what happened there.
Okay.
But your point's well taken. But the signatures are correct on the right side. The witnesses will just be witnesses.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions? This is not a public hearing item, so what's the board's pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Wright?
I make a motion we're recommending, correct?
Correct.
Recommend approval of resolution number 3582-18 with staff's recommendations as written.
I second.
Mr. Minton, was that you?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Pollack?
my only discussion item on this is that I feel like the development agreement should have included cross-access. I feel like it was a failure for it not to be included and considered as part of the development agreement, considering that the applicant was willing to give us an access across a lot that he owned. I feel like I understand that the left-hand turn coming out of that plaza is important to the tenants in that plaza. I feel like somebody may have a very unfortunate incident trying to make a left during rush hour traffic there, and I feel like the failure to include that cross-access here shouldn't have been overlooked, and I can't support the resolution based on that.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
We have one nay. Motion carries. This item comes before the City Council on August 6th. August 6th at 6:30 in these chambers. Good luck.
Madam Chair, I don't often do this, and you don't take this wrong, Mr. Pollack, okay? But the statement that something was overlooked, I just need to say one thing for the record, that there was no engineering testimony tonight by any of the applicant's engineers or any of the city's engineers that supported the requirement for the construction of the road in the cross-access easement. And there was no testimony tonight that indicated there was any danger created by that not being a condition of the development. Okay?
All due respect, I feel like that should have been
Well,
part of this.
that's my honestly don't know
objection is that we didn't have any of these.
I honestly don't know what your profession is, but
I'm a board member. I represent
well,
the community.
but feelings don't mean anything, really. The technical testimony means something. And I didn't hear our city engineers or the engineers from the applicant say anything about that indicated there was any issue.
Actually, I disagree.
That's just important for me to put on the record.
Actually, there was a discussion
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
that said that this was discussed, actually, between the city and the
The
applicant.
funding was discussed.
The cross-access was
The
discussed.
funding was discussed.
The funding for what?
The funding to construct a road within the dedicated cross-access easement area.
Okay. So the fact that that was discussed, and yet it didn't make it to this meeting, I felt like it should have been. And that's my...
Okay, well, I'm not going to argue the point.
No,
That's what I had.
Mr. Groot, thank you.
Okay.
Again, it's August 6th at 6:30 in these chambers. Good luck with your project. We have no public hearing items. We have no discussion items. Our future meeting dates are August 7th and August 21st. Do we know if we have any items for August 7th?
Possibly 2 deviations for residential setbacks.
Okay, so it looks like we'll have a meeting then.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, since it's been a while since we met, it might be time to bring up Mr. Wright's suggestion again about having a transportation person come and talk to us, since this came up again tonight with another one, about the idea of what our traffic situations are. I mean, he's brought it up at least twice in the last year and a half, to have somebody come and talk to us.
And my recollection was that staff was going to work on that.
Right, but since we haven't met in 2 months, we don't know if it has been worked on. But now, if we are going to have a string of meetings where we definitely are going to have something, I think this would be the time to have somebody come in.
Since-
We know we're going to have a dedicated meeting.
Since Dr. Carrera is not here at the moment, can one of you make sure that that gets back to her?
Yes.
That at one of our next few meetings, that can be arranged?
We're a lot closer. There's some technical data that we're still waiting on, but we are getting there.
Thank you.
It's going to be part of the CIE update as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Minton. Okay, if there's nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.